Good day, good day. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jay, and this is Homeschool Your Kids podcast. Today we have with us Linda. Linda, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Linda Rumpf. I'm a tutor, reading tutor, and parent support coach.
Nice. Okay. How did we get here? What made you jump into the tutoring world?
So I used to be a first grade teacher, a Waldorf teacher, actually, teaching kids to read. And then I had too many kids of my own, so I was just a mommy for many years. Some years I homeschooled my children, and some years I didn't. But after my children were grown, I decided to become a tutor and try to make a dent in the literacy crisis. I'm very passionate about the fact that 1/3 of children in the United States currently are not reading on grade level. And I had many choices before me. I was in graduate school and trying to decide, what do I want my second half of my life to look like, after I didn't have to be in the home being a mommy anymore. And so I picked reading because it's something that we really need.
Yes, ma'am. Reading comprehension. Because a lot of kids are reading the words and not even comprehending what they're reading. A lot of adults also. So it ain't even just kids. But yeah, no, that's very, very important. Very important. I'm glad that you have jumped gung-ho into that because we need those services. So what's the name of your tutoring service?
So my business is called My High Impact Tutoring. And so as the name says, I'm what they call a high impact tutor. And many people have had this experience in the schools now, where through the IEP classroom or through the tutoring that's available after school, children who are behind grade level in reading are put in group settings where there are really too many children in that setting for remedial reader to get the attention they need for their individual issues. And so they do not progress or quickly enough to really close the gap. So the federal government, through the National Student Support Accelerator, has come out with the research that says that, and they're calling it high impact tutoring, that one-on-one tutoring or tutoring that's in really small groups, like one teacher and maybe 2 students or maybe 3, but the best is 1-to-1, is it's far superior because also the tutor can bond to the student better. A lot of times students in a group setting, remedial readers, don't want to read in front of the other kids, understandably. So
Indeed.
If you have a meeting one-on-one with a tutor, then the child can read aloud. The teacher can identify the exact miscues of when that one child reads, and then can zoom in and really target what that student needs. Because an older student, for instance, who's in maybe 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, but who's behind some levels in reading, it won't be that they've learned nothing. They will have learned some parts of reading, but we need to identify those gaps. So it's a little different than just starting in with a set curriculum. We really have to have a chance for the children to read to us. And that just doesn't always take place in the group or in the IEP room.
Indeed. No, it doesn't. And I like that you highlighted that the high impact and made that your tutoring like, hey, no, this is needed. This is very efficient. Okay. Because one-on-one is definitely different than 1 to 29, 1 to 35, things of that nature. when you have a host of IEPs staring at you and 9 of those 29 kids need accommodations in some way, and you always wonder, like, how in the world do they expect you to really do this? Like, how am I going to assist this child one-on-one while the other 28, what I'm going to do with these other 28 kids that are looking at me right now? So one-on-one is way more efficient. Even the 1-2, 1-3, I can even give you up to about 1-5. But once the numbers keep growing, you can't reach everyone where they're at. You can't have that same impact or a high impact on their learning if you're not more, like face to face, like really, I don't
Yeah,
know.
and also just giving them the chance to read to you aloud.
Yeah.
Back in the day, they had what was called recitation. Like 100 years ago, children had to stand up in front of the classroom, and stand and deliver. They had to read. And I'm sure that for the bad readers, it was horrifying
I know,
and
but it wasn't even
emotionally
an
scarring,
option.
emotionally
Yes.
scarring the whole thing. But there was actually logic to that, because when we read out loud, we develop what's called phonological awareness. So we hear our own mistakes, right?
Mm.
So reading is a very complex activity. It's not really natural. We made it up, you know, but it's multisensory. So there's a listening component, and there's a visual component, and then there's a component in the hand, like when we write words, because we know them. And for instance, with a dyslexic child, they could have a situation where they can see words, but then they can't spell them. So then you see there's a disconnect. I can't make that myself, right? So I don't really know it. So there are these multisensory aspects that go into being a good reader, which is being able to see and decode, being able to hear, so that having previously heard the word, when you were, growing up, whatever, before you went to school, you heard a lot of vocabulary in your house, and then that's ongoing as you watch TV, as you hear your parents have conversation, as you listen to your teacher. That's ongoing. You're taking in the vocabulary all the time audially. And then when children see a word on a page, as they start to decode it, their brain makes a connection. So they don't have to decode the whole word. They decode the first part and then, oh, I know what that word is. Plus, then the meaning jumps in because they've heard the word in context, or they've heard someone use it in a sentence. So there are all these components to reading. And we have largely in the classroom dropped out the phonological component.
That's what I was just sitting here thinking. Like, that's an issue because they're teaching sight words now. So basically memorization.
Well, in the 90s, we had this experiment where the world of education decided, yes, that words would be taught in a memorized fashion rather than phonically. And then 10 years later, in 2000, the president at the time came out and said, okay, this didn't work. The reading stats were dismal after 10 years of that, and came out and said, now all teachers will have to include phonics in their instruction. However, the law allows what's called mixed methods. So during that 10 years, this is the problem. During that 10 years, a lot of teachers in teacher training college were taught the memorization method, just memorizing individual words. So then these teachers are now in the classroom. And when they're being told, well, you need to include phonics now, but you can use mixed methods. So what do you think happened?
They kept with the sight word. They kept with the memorization.
And stuck a little bit of phonics in, right?
Yeah, of course. You're going to stay where you're comfortable. Yes.
Yeah. So then this continued and continued and continued. Now we're at 2024, almost 25 years after that, and the problem is still there. because of this mixed methods
Yeah.
language, that they used when this mandate came down to start including phonics again in the classroom. So now the government, of course, is really zooming in on phonics. And we're going to have some big changes coming down the line over the next
Oh.
few years. We hope.
Yeah, rightfully so. I know, right? Because I told people, like, people feel like the 2020 shutdown was a reason for a lot of the gaps that we now see with kids and grade levels and not being on their grade level. And I was like, no, these kids been not on their grade level. It was way before then. So I'm glad that you put that out there, that there was like, you know, the transitioning from, okay, yeah, no, we're not going to do phonetics anymore. So, oh, no, let's bring that back. And then to the present of, all right, well, we're going to do both of them, but, you know, just work it out how you, no one's in these classrooms. There's no one besides the teacher in the classroom. So if it's something that they're not comfortable with doing, you better believe they're going to stick with those sight words. And like you said, throw a little phonics in there here and there. But I just think of just like how much of a handicap that is.
It's a huge handicap. The children whose parents hire me to get them back on grade level with their reading, they have not been taught to syllabicate. So remember when we were little and we were taught syllables, like with the word rabbit, rabbit, two syllables, right? So that's phonological, isn't it? It's like we can hear the parts of a word because that's how we normally separate it with our speech, If I say homeschool yo kids, that's 4 syllables all together, right? My name, Linda, 2 syllables there. Okay. So that's a hearing thing, right? Well, if you do it on paper, if you learn to syllabicate and break words on paper, there are rules for syllabication. And we used to teach these rules back in the day because everyone wasn't using a home computer. And so when you came to the end of a line of written type, you had to put a hyphen. Remember that? I don't know if you are old enough to remember that, but you had to put a little dash to break the word. If you had a word and you came to the end of a line, okay? And then you write the rest of the word on the next line. Well, computers just wrap it. We don't even need to know that anymore, how to hyphenate words. But what that taught us was the building blocks of the word. And so when you syllabicate, for example, if I have the word rabbit, okay, and it has the 2 B's in the middle, the 2 consonants together. Well, one of the things you learn is that you break a word between if you have a double consonant, you break it between there. Then you have rab, R-A-B, and bit, B-I-T. When you have a syllable with 2 consonants on either side and a vowel stuck in the middle, like R-A-B, okay, then we say one little vowel squished in the middle makes its short sound just a little. So whenever you have what we call a closed syllable where there are 2 consonants and a vowel in the middle, that vowel is going to say a short sound. So the A says ah. So it's not rabbit, it's always rabbit because of the way the syllable looks after you break it. Okay, so we were taught that when we were little, all right? But when all of a sudden, when children weren't taught that anymore, that's another one of my big things is if you don't know how to syllabicate on paper, then you don't understand why a vowel is pronounced short or long. Like if you have the word, let's see, totem, okay? Then you have only one consonant after that vowel, T-O-T-E-M, right? There's no double like with rabbit. There's just one T in the middle. So you have to break in front of it, okay? So it's T-O is your first syllable, toe, and then tem. But notice how that O is long? Toe. Okay, that's because there's no extra consonant after that T in the middle of the word. There's no two consonants to break in the middle of. So your first syllable ends with a vowel. It's what we call an open syllable. They will always be long vowel sounds. As soon as the children that I teach this to, and we're separating all the little words on the page, as soon as I teach them the pattern, suddenly they understand when they're decoding words what vowels are short and what are long. And they're like, and I have adults who went to school during the 90s. Now, like one of my adult students is 42. Okay. She was in grade school in the 90s.
Mm.
And she said to me, Linda, I can't believe I didn't learn this. Like, because she was in her adult life, she was having problems reading. She could get
Mm.
by in her work environment, but she knew she had like a dirty little secret that she wasn't
Aw.
that good at reading. And she hid it because she could pretty much get by. She was reading about maybe a fifth grade level. But then when
Mm.
she would go for promotions or when someone would offer to put her in for a promotion at work, she would always say no because she
Aw.
knew if she had to send emails all of a sudden, if she had to do higher level reading, she wouldn't be able to do it. And so she got sick of that and she hired me. And she's come so far, she's reading on a 12th grade level now.
Nice.
And part of that is just learning these little tricks, these little things that we
Yeah.
should have all learned, in the first,
Should
second, third
have.
grade. And they're just not teaching anymore. Um, it's crazy, isn't it? How we learn things as a culture and then we like forget them. Like,
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I think like a lot of people once they graduate high school, like that's it for learning for them. Like it's like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to do this job that I'm about to go work and pay my bills with, but I'm not trying to learn to or life learners aren't necessarily created through the public school system, in my opinion. I don't feel like the love for learning is something that flows through that system. And so when people come to the end of 12, 13 years of public school education, they shut off from everything else. Like, oh, don't teach me nothing else. Like, leave me alone. Let me live my life. Let me go get a job or go to college or whatever, that case, whatever it is. But yeah, no, I'm not about to do all this stuff. Whatever I didn't catch in those 13 years, I'm not catching.
yeah. And particularly if you were not taught in a good way, or you were not taught in a way that made
Yes.
sense, or you were not given the map, the real map to how
Or
to
you
learn.
being labeled. That's a big thing right now, too, being labeled. So once you're labeled with a learning disability or labeled and someone tells you that you can't learn in a correct way, then yeah, no, that's a hard thing to overcome.
Yeah. And I think that's, why you're here and why a lot of people are choosing homeschooling so that
Yeah.
they can track the quality.
Indeed. Teaching reading is intimidating, though. I will tell you from the homeschool perspective, as far as my 7-year-old goes, like it's still, an ongoing thing. My 10-year-old, she's way more confident, way more like it's been a joy to watch her strength, like to watch her grow to where she's at. I will tell you, like that's been really dope to be able to witness myself. But my lovely 7-year-old honey, when she was about 4 or 5, when we first started on this journey, it was she would sit in front of a book and she would just start bawling, like crying. I'm like, okay, never mind. Let's not do that. So let's not do that. Okay. You don't want it. I don't want it. So, and I don't remember myself learning how to read. I'm an avid reader. I love reading. I've always loved reading. I think I talk more than I read when I was younger. I feel like I went into kindergarten knowing how to read, but out of teaching reading is a whole different thing though. Like just because I love to read doesn't mean that it's something easy to do.
Yeah.
Takes a
It's
lot of patience,
interesting.
Linda.
Oh, sorry.
It takes a lot of patience.
It's interesting that you say you talked a lot. I talked a lot too. My mother jokes that I was born speaking in paragraphs, but there's actual research that has made a connection between vocalization and decoding in reading.
Mm,
So kids who vocalize more are faster decoders when it comes to reading.
I could definitely see that.
I had a student who was very quiet, just by personality, right? And very behind, many grade levels behind in reading. And
Mm,
he I had read the research on vocalization and linked to decoding. So I began to work with him on conversation, and the
mm.
decoding took off. So, that's that phonological awareness again. Like, for some reason, as human beings, we have to hear ourselves speak the words to really understand them.
Yeah. I've talked to individuals as old as 50, 52 that talk about their reading, their lack of comprehension when reading. And I just think about all the adults that, like you say, you have a young lady in your class that's in her 40s, and she's becoming a more proficient reader, but that takes a lot of courage to go and ask for that type of help at that age. You
Yeah.
know, there's some people carry shame with that. So I'm glad that she felt comfortable enough to say, hey, I need some help. And to stop limiting herself. You said she was passing up promotions and everything. So like that's sad. That's a lot. But that's a norm though, I feel like you said 1/3. And even when you said 1/3 of children aren't reading on level, and I'm thinking like, sure, it's just 1/3. Like I feel like that number is even higher than that for real.
Well, 80% of the children who are not reading on grade level right now in the US are like low SES. Okay. So this also runs by demographics. So
Mm,
depending on what kind of community you live in, it might seem like, oh my God, all these kids can't read, right? Or if you had a lot of experiences with public schools, okay? I know I'm from Cincinnati, and we have a big segregation in
mm,
Cincinnati between the public school population and private school and parochial school population. It's literally segregated. Like
mm,
it's maybe 97% low SES, like poor kids basically, okay? Who
mm,
who are filling up the public schools. And anyone who could scrape together tuition got out, left the public schools.
mm,
So I feel like the statistics are kind of skewed because, they're gathering those statistics from the public schools, right?
mm, mm.
So yeah, I mean, that is one reason I wanted to come on your show, as you know, because
Yeah.
people pay me to tutor their children, but when I was reading all these statistics about who is really hit hardest by the literacy crisis, I realized that I needed to do something too to help kids and families who can't just afford to pay for private tutoring. And so I created a booklet. And
Nice.
my
Tell us about the
booklet,
booklet.
yeah, can I talk about my booklet?
Yeah.
Okay. So my booklet is called How to Help Your Reader at Home. And it is available on my Facebook group page called Miss Linda's Guided Reading Parent Support Group on Facebook. And it is a booklet which teaches my technique that I use. So it's called Guided Reading. And so that's the technique. And in that technique, you have a child read to you, read aloud for half of the designated time for the lesson. So if it's an older child, your lesson might be an hour, and they might read to you fully 30 minutes. If it's a younger child, like a first grader, you might have maybe a 20-minute lesson, you know, and so they might read to you for 10 minutes, or you might even have, you know, a 15-minute lesson or something, and they might read to you for half of that. So you have to kind of go by age. You can't necessarily expect the really young children to be reading aloud for 30 minutes, but by the time the child gets in about fourth, fifth grade, they can definitely read for 30 minutes aloud to you.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I do is assess the reader to find out what level book they should be in. And this is really, really important. I give free assessments, by the way, on my website. So it's myhighimpacttutoring.com.
Nice.
And so that's one thing I can do to help as well is if you come to my website and you pick a day and time, I will give you a free assessment of your child. And I use the Pearson qualitative reading assessment. So it's a high level assessment, and we'll be able to tell what your child's instructional level is with reading. So the instructional level is the level at which they might miss like maybe 4 or 5 words in a reading passage, but no more. So if they're missing, like 2 words every sentence or something, then as you can probably guess, the reading comprehension goes way down.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the end of the sentence, you don't even remember what the beginning part said, because you're struggling through too much. You want a few words that the child doesn't know so that they have something to learn, but you don't want too many. So I have to figure out, I give them different reading passages that are leveled to different grade levels. And we go through different level vocabulary lists, and I figure out what is their instructional level. So because if a child is trying to read at frustrational level, say they're in the 5th grade, but they're reading at like a 3rd grade level, and every day they go to 5th grade and in their classroom, they're trying to read at this level, they cannot learn, they can't get better because their brain is already in frustration mode, right? But then if you take them to the IEP room, and you put them down at 3rd grade level, okay, the level that that is easy for them to read, they also won't learn. So here's the trick. It's got to just be one step up, okay, from what's super easy for them. So there's a little bit of a challenge. That's your instructional level, right? So once we figure that out for the parent, and I can tell the parent, then the parent can go to the library. They can get books at this level. And then, then they're set up for their reading lesson. So the child reads to them, and then the parent writes down the miscues. So miscues are like, the words they skip or mispronounce or couldn't figure out, right? And so the parent doesn't interrupt when the child is reading. And I mean, you can help a little, like, if they look to you and they really want help with a longer word, you could help, of course, but we're not interrupting them if they mispronounce a word or if they drop a word. We're just letting them read, okay? And then we look at the list afterward, and you will see patterns in your list. It's really cool. Like, you will see that, for instance, every time they came to a silent E word, ending word, a word that ended in silent E, they pronounced the E or something. Like, instead of the word smile, they said smiley, or instead of the word time, they said timey. And then you can see, oh, we need to talk about that, right? So that's what we call then we use what we call word families. So you make a list in front of the child of a whole bunch of words, different words that are spelled with a similar pattern, and you go over it and over it and over it till they finally catch the pattern. And so, there are many things that I do in a lesson that come from my training, but there are many things that are just common sense, like the things I just said, right? That parents can learn how to do. And if you could do this, if you sat down and did these things with your child, 3 times a week, you would see them go up and up and up in grade level. So I created this booklet, and it's called How to Help Your Reader at Home. And you can download it on my Facebook group, Miss Linda's Guided Reading Parent Support Group, and it's a free download. So it's out there, it's available for you. And I
Right.
wanted to come on your show today just to try to let as many people know who are trying to homeschool their kids, that that's there for support for you.
Well, that's much appreciated, because I'm gonna even check it out. I told you the whole teaching of the reading thing is very like, oh, okay, because it's you to how to explain certain things you don't really have the words for. It's like, okay, this is like this because of so and so. Like no, like KNOW. Like how do you like a child learning how to read and they got this big K in the front of a word that you don't even pronounce? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Well,
Did
you
this.
got to be careful with because. Yeah, because I mean, depending on the age of the child, when the children get a little older, we start to teach them word roots and prefixes and suffixes.
Yes.
And then when we talk about word roots, we can say, well, this word came from Old English, where they had a K there because they pronounced it. So they said canal or something like. And then when it came over to English, we just dropped it. But with the younger children, I don't go into because a lot. I just say, oh, there's a silent letter,
Yeah.
and then they start to learn. They just
Oh yeah,
start.
my 7-year-old, she'll ask now. She'll be like, is this silent?" Like, no, you need to pronounce it. Go ahead. Sound it
Well, it
out.
sounds like you're doing
But
a
yeah,
great job.
thank you. I need that. I need that, okay? Because I get worried at times, but not for real. I'm just playing. But it's a lot. And I definitely know that parents, that's a frustration for parents. And that's a concern and like, a struggle. So to know that you have my high impact tutoring service, not only are you offering support in reading, but you also have the booklet, and then you also offer the parent support. What does that look like? The parent, like you call it parent support, right? Or a coaching,
Yeah.
what is it?
Well, what I want, my dream, okay, was to have parents enroll their children in my tutoring, and that I would tutor the parent separately at the same time that I would tutor the child, and that we would have these 6 weeks, okay, that they would come into the program. I would be getting the child their start, okay, and then because I can raise a child a grade level in 3 months.
Mm,
So, and
nice.
that's even severely dyslexic children. If they come to me 2 times a week, I can do it in
Okay,
three
Linda.
months. Yeah.
Nice.
But if the parents came to me 2 times a week for 6 weeks on a separate day, like I would have a Zoom, say Monday night for all the parents, okay? And like if I had 10 families in the group, okay? Then I would have these 10 parents come together, like on a Monday night or something, and I would give them 6 separate lessons where we would go over
Mm,
phonics, we would go over um, syllabication, we would go over how to choose leveled books and get the right reading material in there. We would go over the kingdom of childhood. Why doesn't the child want to learn from you as the parent? How to take that hat off and put on the other hat. How to make this not
mm,
about butts and seats and you're going to do this. But how to attach love of reading
yes.
to the
Yes.
process, how to make it this thing that bonds parents and kids, like a love of reading and sitting down and cuddling together and doing this thing that I did with my mom or dad when I was little that becomes this thing I love now as an adult, which is reading. How to make it into that instead of a
Mm-hmm.
battle, you know. So just I wanted to do this whole program where I taught parents at the same time that I was teaching the kids then at different times,
Mhm.
so that the parents could pick up and carry on after 6 weeks.
Yes, that's important.
Yeah, and then they wouldn't have to be. It was also a thing to try. I mean, I do make my living tutoring, but just to try to get more children up to grade level who couldn't necessarily afford like months and months and months of tutoring, right? That the parents could be trained to
Mhm.
do the guided reading lessons in the home.
That's needed. Because I'm thinking on the level of, okay, so I had a seventh grader one time, and after she took the star reading test, it suggested to me that I give her work on a it said that she was reading on a kindergarten grade level, but it told me to give her pre-K work. And she was in the seventh grade, Linda. And so I'm thinking like, okay, what are we supposed to do with this? Like, where am I supposed to go with this? And then to find out from the inclusion teacher who was in the classroom with me, her mother couldn't read either. So this was a generational thing. So her mother would have had to have been brought in and said, hey, how about this be a process y'all both do together? Like, y'all need to learn together, because I know it's pretty intimidating, especially as a parent, to have your child be able to read at a higher level than you or know more than you. Like that frustrates parents. It does. That's what.
Well, I can tell you something that might be super surprising to your audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a child once gain a grade level in 6 weeks. So my
Nice.
average is 3 months. Okay. So he cut the
Mm-hmm.
time in half. And I started
Right.
talking to his mom about what she was doing. Like, okay, she was an immigrant mom. She came
Mm-hmm.
from South America. The child was fluent, like as a native speaker, because he had actually been born here in America and gone through the public school system. He was in the 5th grade when we started, and he was reading, but his was it was true COVID learning loss. Like he did not have any reading
Mm-hmm.
deficits. Um, but it was right after COVID, and he was reading about 2 grade levels behind.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it was he didn't have any reading deficits, but the other part was, even though she could barely speak English to me, even when we would Zoom and talk to each other, she made him sit down for 30 minutes every night in the kitchen, at the kitchen table, while she was preparing dinner and feeding the baby and whatever she had to do. He had to read aloud to her. She couldn't correct him. She couldn't participate. She couldn't do all these things that I would teach parents to do, with word families and with hearing the miscues. She couldn't do any of it. And he still cut the time in half,
Mm-hmm.
um, for closing his reading gap. And I felt after that that was one of the reasons I really could teach parents to help their
Mm-hmm.
children, because you just really need to give the child the expectation that
Of
they are going to
reading.
read aloud,
Right.
that they are going to read every day, or at least 3 times a week, that reading is going to happen in the home, right? And if they read out loud, it just doubles the effectiveness, because they're hearing, because like I was saying before, they get that phonological awareness. If they read aloud a word and it sounds weird to them, their eye will go back, and then they'll see their mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that crazy that all it really took was willpower for her to be like, you're sitting in this chair and you're going to do
Yeah,
this.
or consistency. I was thinking consistency, just the fact that she had him doing it every night.
Yeah, every
I
single
know
night.
that was probably helping her too with vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, adults learn differently. I don't know if she was tuning in or if that was helping her at all, but after that, I realized that it wasn't so much about teaching. I would want to share some basic info with parents about phonics and about all those different things I was talking about. But really what I would want more than that is the commitment, you know? And I thought that I could get that commitment if they knew that being in those sessions with me, it meant, okay, I only have to be in this program for 6 weeks. I don't need to pay for a year of tutoring with my kid. And that they would become motivated through those 6 weeks, that they would get their new habit in order. Because it takes what, 30, 40 days to put any new habit in order, they
No,
say.
sometimes they say 21, Linda. Sometimes they say 21.
Oh,
Is it
okay.
30, 40? Like, is it 30, 40? Is that how many we need?
I don't know. I mean, who knows, right?
I say it depends on who you're asking always. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I marketed that a little bit, and I didn't really get any takers for that. And I think it was because of the price. That even 6 weeks of tutoring was just a lot. It was, and so then it was after that that I wrote the booklet and really started to try to figure out how can I disseminate this information in a way that, will reach the most people.
Nice. I so appreciate it. That you look wasn't making what you needed to make in tutoring. It's like, hey, let me go ahead and make a free resource for you guys. Like,
Yeah.
because it's that much on your heart though that you really want to help. Because I do describe, and I have had other people describe the literacy issue as a national crisis. It is something to really be concerned about as anyone, as being here in the nation. You should be concerned about the fact that our kids are not able to read and comprehend on a grade level, that, or just on any kind of level, really. It's a concern. It should be a concern for all. It should.
It's
Should
huge.
definitely. Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge.
I
They're going to be running our country. So,
Indeed. I remember reading an article when I was still in the classroom about for like our sports players, our college students getting to college, and some even be making their way sophomores, juniors, and still reading on a third grade level.
mm-hmm. Well, they say that the general public reads on about a 5th grade level. Like
That's
it's like 5th
that's
to
why they
6th.
had to show, are you smarter than a fifth grader?
Yeah.
Because that's the average, huh?
Yeah. So, you know, um, I think that it's already like our society is already kind of struggling with literacy. Um, but then, yeah, I mean, with the sports programs and things like that, you get students who are, say, really good at a sport. And so the school wants to keep promoting them from grade to grade, but maybe they did not accomplish what they needed to at that grade. So there are these reasons that aren't even educational, right? Why people are promoted more quickly than they really can handle. And so then they get again to that frustrational level. And once they get to that frustrational level, they're not taking in new information. So the whole thing just stops and the gap just widens.
Yes, because they shut down. Some of them, that frustration level turns into anger, like straight anger. And so they just spend a lot of the time lashing out. I know the young lady who was in the 7th grade reading on the kindergarten grade level. Oh, she used to cuss out her classmates all the time. And I used to tell her, like, stop talking to them like that. But she was upset. Like, you're in the grade that you're nowhere near understanding anything that they're doing, like anything that any of your classmates are doing, anything that.
Oh, sorry, I had a little coughing attack. Sorry.
No way.
I turned off my video, but not my audio, and I'm like, oh,
Not the, yeah, I'm about to say, yeah, I think she meant to
that
mute.
didn't
No
help
worry.
at all. Sorry.
You are fine. But yes, that frustration definitely shuts down our youth in a lot of instances. I just can't imagine like being in a class and a lot of the things that you're hearing are just foreign to you because a lot of it you have no idea what it is that people are talking about. And reading to me is it just goes across the board, even with doing math or science or history. You have to be able to read. Like you have to be able to read.
Yeah, and the it's really sad when it's a case of dyslexia.
Yeah.
That student has could be highly intelligent, but the eyes are letter switching, or things are moving on the page. And so, and that can, we can teach dyslexic to read.
Of course.
But you have to know how to do it. And so it makes me sad that even though in our society now, in the educational world, we know all about dyslexia, we have dyslexia specialists, children come to me who are not even diagnosed.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But the ones that are misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all, they fall through the crack, and some of them get to adulthood without even being told or recognized as that being a disability for them.
Yeah, and this is over the past 10 years. I mean, we're not talking, this is currently, it's still happening. Yeah, I
With
have
all the technology we have. Yes.
and all the knowledge. So, you know, um, I hope I make a difference one person at
You
a time,
are.
but if your audience are homeschooling, I know because it's, your audience are homeschooling. If you have a concern that your child isn't reading on what you think should be their grade level, or that there may be dyslexia or some other reading issue, please contact me and get that free assessment,
Yes.
because we need to figure that out. A lot of parents are afraid for their children to be labeled.
Mm-hmm.
I have a student right now whose mother was very hesitant to ever have him diagnosed with anything. And it's understandable because once you get labeled, then kids can think poorly of themselves, or,
Yes.
other people can think a certain thing, even teachers,
Yes, I think there's a learned helplessness involved with those labels. I feel like once you get a label and it's like a helplessness, like a voice telling you, oh, well, I'm always going to need help, or oh, I'm never going to be able to do this right, or I'm going to always be behind. Like I feel like that's what labels do a lot of the
Mhm.
times.
They really can. And in the case of dyslexia, I remember about 10, maybe 20, 15, 20 years ago, um, we started, in some circles, we stopped thinking of it as a dis. Like we stopped thinking of it as a disability and started thinking of it as a different ability, like in some cases, a super ability, because
I like that.
supposedly, quote unquote, dyslexics are actually visual thinkers who excel at computer programming and things where four quadrant geometry is used, where you have to flip things in mirror
Mm-hmm.
images. It poses them a problem when they're trying to do a very linear activity, like read in a line across a page, because their brain is looking at all dimensions of something, sometimes at once. But then they have amazing superpowers in other disciplines, right? So it's not necessarily, you know, how we would think of it, like this. um, it's a difference, right? But it's not, that person is not lesser, you know? And but however, we do have to figure out what's going on in order to help that person with reading. So the approach I take is not telling people your child's dyslexic. In fact, it does take a psychologist to diagnose, so I couldn't diagnose it anyway. But I do a screening for it, and I can tell pretty quickly if letter switching is happening or the different markers for dyslexia. But I don't use that word. Ever since I worked with that one parent, it raised my awareness that parents really don't want their child labeled. And then I realized I don't have to use that label at all, and I don't even have to think of it that way. We just we just observe the facts. We just talk about the words. We just look at the techniques we can use, different techniques, different ways we have. Eye tracking. I do things online because I teach online. And so like on Zoom, there's like a pencil tool. And I put the Kindle books right up there on the computer screen. So we're looking at the books together, and I'm separating and making the syllables and doing different things and helping their eye track, or if they skipped a part of a word, doing a little underline of the part they skipped. I don't even have to say a word. And their eye goes back and then they read it. So there are all these techniques that we can do without the need for labels.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for seeing it that way, because the connotation associated with some words are negative. And so when you think of that, you're going to think negatively. So if you're able to diagnose or suggest or whatever without having to say, oh, okay, this is a disability, or because I always say, like, what if we didn't call them? I like how you said a superpower. Like, what if we didn't call them disabilities and we call them something else? Would it be more empowering? And that would definitely be the case in that. How can we find my high impact tutoring? I know you spoke on it earlier, but let's say it again.
I'm sorry. Struggling with a cough today. So it's my website is myhighimpacttutoring.com, and the Facebook group is Miss Linda's Guided Reading Parent Support Group on Facebook. So that's where you can find me.
Nice, nice. Thank you so much for that. And before I let you go, can you give parents 3 things to consider when teaching their children how to read?
Okay, so 3 things to consider. So number 1 is to have your child read aloud to you 3 to 5 times a week. And, that goes by age level as to how long they read. But I would say for like a first grader, they could read to you out loud for 10 minutes, even 10 minutes. And then you work your way up to once they're in the 4th, 5th grade, they could be reading to you for a half hour. And if they do that 3 to 5 times a week, just the reading aloud itself, they will gain grade levels through the phonological awareness that builds in them. Hearing themselves, they will hear their own mistakes and they will start to self-correct. So number 1, reading aloud in the home. Number 2, studies have shown that homes that have 100 books in them have a much higher literacy rate in the children. So go to the library, start piling books up in your house, go to those library sales or those
Stores.
book giveaways, and yeah, the thrift store has all those books for 50 cents, right? And 25 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And try to get a lot of books on their level or slightly higher than their level. Not super high, but not super low. Books that are what you think would be about their grade level, but just a touch higher, so that they have something to reach toward but that it's not frustrational for them. Just a few little mysteries in there for them to solve with those longer words, right? And then the third thing that I want to say is higher literacy in the home has also been linked to one behavior by parents. And so about maybe 25, 30 years ago, they did this study because it came down that families that sat around the dinner table together for their meal every day, their evening meal or whatever, that they had higher literacy rates in the home. But it didn't seem to necessarily follow from just sitting at a table together. So they wanted to figure out, well, what actually was it though that the parents were doing at the table? So they did the study where they went into a lot of different homes, and they found that when parents used asides in their speech, that the literacy rate in the home was way higher.
When they use what?
Asides. So what an aside is like when you use a word, one of your vocabulary words that you know, right? But then you think maybe the child doesn't know that word. So then you use it in a sentence and then you give a little quick definition of it just in your conversation. So like if I'm a teacher and I'm sitting around the dinner table with my kids and my spouse, I might say something like, so one of the kids in my class brought a chameleon to show and tell today. You know, that lizard that changes its color depending on like its surroundings. And then I would just keep on talking about what happened in show and tell or whatever. Well, when I say, you know, blah, 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 and I give like a little mini definition of the word, that's an aside.
Okay.
And so it was actually the speech patterns of the parents who give these definitions constantly. You know, they don't even think about it when they do it, but they're constantly defining words for their child. That was actually one of the biggest builders of literacy. Because it's because of that phonological awareness again, that word imprints on the brain, that definition imprints on the brain, because we took it in our ear through conversation. And then later on, maybe even a grade level or 2 grade levels or whatever down the road, we see that word on a page in a book. And as we start to sound it out or look at the word, we know what it means suddenly because we've heard it before. We've heard the definition, right? And so the reading just goes so much faster. So those would be the three tips: reading aloud on a consistent basis, not you reading to the child, but the child reading to you, right? So that they can hear themselves. And although reading to your children, I'm not knocking that, you know, for the younger ones, especially, that's very good. So the child reads aloud. Number 2 was, what was number 2?
Oh, wait. What was number 2? Number 2.
Now my brain is frying.
Reading aloud. Then we had the dinner table aside. I know. Oh my goodness. Don't do this. Oh. No, I was so caught up in the side. Like, it's like I was really caught up there. What came before?
Well, now your whole audience is probably like, I know, I remember.
I know, right? Like, oh my God, it was just, you just said it. Goodness. Okay, reading out loud. And then what was it? Okay. Yeah. I'm not gonna be able to bring it back. It's okay though. It's okay. They know. The listeners know. But yes, thank you for those. Thank you for all 3. Even if the middle one got lost somewhere.
Even if we're here all having our senior moments, right?
I know. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm not gonna hold you when I'm distracted by food. I smell it. Look, I smell it and I can almost taste it because I know I'm close to getting it. So that's my excuse. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for being a resource. Thank you for creating what you created for others. Free resources. I appreciate it all. And I know other families do as well. And this serves as a reminder to families, once again, that this is not a journey you have to do alone. Whatever you feel that you are lacking or need support with, you can continue to do. Or you can continue to find that support. So make sure you tap into your resources and, hey, homeschool your kids. Oh, mama.